Captain Daniel Reyes had survived 3 deployments, 2 firefights that should have killed him, and 1 IED blast that nearly did, but nothing in his 18 years of service had prepared him for the war he was about to fight from a hospital bed. Because today, I'm going to tell you the story of a wounded soldier, a terrified 8-year-old boy, and a nurse who almost didn't listen when it mattered most. And by the time this story ends, you'll understand why some of the bravest people in the world aren't the ones carrying weapons. They're the ones who refuse to look away when something feels wrong. So stay with me until the end, because this one will stay with you long after it's over. And if you believe in stories about courage and kindness, this channel is where you'll find them. So if this is your first time here, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now, because you will not want to miss what happens next. Shrapnel tearing through his left leg and his abdomen, and when the medevac helicopter finally touched down at the base hospital, the trauma team said the same thing they always said about him, that he was too stubborn to die, and they were right, because 3 weeks later, Daniel Reyes was transferred stateside to a private recovery wing at a hospital in a quiet American town, still fighting infections, still relearning how to walk, and still, somehow, smiling every time his son Ethan walked through the door, because Ethan was 7 years old when the explosion happened, and 8 by the time his father was finally well enough for regular visits. And every single day after school his mother would drop him off at the hospital for an hour before dinner. And every single day Ethan would climb into the chair beside his father's bed and tell him about his day like nothing in the world had changed. But something had changed, and nobody noticed it at first, because grief and fear do strange things to a family. And Daniel's wife, a school teacher named Claire, was drowning under the weight of medical bills, half days at work, and nights spent crying quietly in the hospital parking lot where she thought no one could see her. So when the hospital assigned a private overnight caregiver named Patricia to help manage Daniel's medication and monitor his recovery during the hours Claire couldn't be there, it felt like a gift from heaven. Patricia was 51 years old, soft-spoken, with 2 decades of nursing experience on her resume, and the kind of calm, practiced warmth that made exhausted families exhale for the first time in weeks. She complimented Ethan's drawings. She brought Daniel his favorite crossword puzzles. She remembered small details like how he liked his water with extra ice. And within 2 weeks she had become, in Claire's words, the answer to our prayers. But there was one person in that hospital room who never relaxed around Patricia, and that person was Ethan. At first everyone dismissed it as a child adjusting to a stranger. He'd go quiet when she entered the room, he'd tug on his father's blanket, and ask to sit closer to the bed. He'd stop talking mid-sentence if she walked past, and once, Claire noticed him staring at Patricia's hands with an expression that looked less like shyness and more like fear. But grief-exhausted parents often miss what's right in front of them, not because they don't love their children, but because survival mode narrows the world down to the next hour, the next bill, the next dose of medication. And so weeks passed, and Daniel's recovery, which should have been steadily improving, instead began to stall. His blood pressure would spike unpredictably during the overnight hours. He'd wake up disoriented and nauseous on mornings after Patricia's shifts, and twice he mentioned to Claire that he felt foggier than he should this far out from surgery. The day-charge nurse, a woman named Rebecca Coleman, who had worked trauma recovery for over 16 years, started noticing the pattern in Daniel's charts before anyone else did. Medication administration times that didn't quite align with the schedule, vital sign fluctuations that had no clear medical explanation, and a patient who kept apologizing for being difficult. When he wasn't being difficult at all, he was being poisoned by confusion he couldn't name. Rebecca raised her concerns twice in team meetings, and was told twice that Patricia had an impeccable record, and that the family adored her, so the concerns were quietly filed away. Until the afternoon everything changed. Ethan was sitting in his usual chair, drawing a picture of a superhero with his father's face, when Patricia stepped out to grab supplies, and the moment the door clicked shut, Ethan set down his crayon, climbed onto the edge of his father's bed, and whispered 5 words that would echo through that hospital for weeks to come. "He hurts Daddy when you leave." Daniel froze, his mind still slowed from medication, and asked his son gently what he meant. And Ethan, eyes filling with tears, admitted that he had seen Patricia give his father extra medicine during the nights he stayed over with his grandmother nearby. Medicine she didn't write down. Medicine that made his father sleep strangely and wake up sick. Daniel wanted to believe it was a child's imagination, exhaustion, misunderstanding, anything other than the truth, but something in his gut. The same instinct that had kept him alive through 3 deployments told him his son was not lying. So the next morning, when Rebecca came in for her rounds, Daniel asked her to stay for a moment, and quietly repeated what Ethan had told him. Word for word, Rebecca didn't dismiss it. She didn't rationalize it away. She simply said, "Let's find out." And from that moment forward, Rebecca Coleman became the guardian angel this family didn't know they needed. She quietly requested a full audit of medication logs against pharmacy dispensing records. She arranged for a hidden monitoring review during Patricia's next overnight shift, fully within hospital policy. And she personally stayed 2 hours past her shift to observe firsthand. What she uncovered confirmed the worst. Patricia had been administering unauthorized sedative doses during overnight hours. Doses that were never logged, doses that explained the blood pressure spikes, the disorientation, the slow poisoning of a man who had already given so much of his body to protect his country. When hospital security and administration confronted her with the evidence, Patricia's calm demeanor cracked instantly. And what followed was a swift termination, an immediate report to the state nursing board, and a criminal investigation into what prosecutors would later describe as a pattern of medication tampering across multiple patients under her care. Patients too weak, too medicated, or too trusting to notice what was happening to them. Daniel Reyes, 39 years old, decorated Navy SEAL captain, survivor of combat. Most people can't imagine. Later told Rebecca through tears that the scariest moment of his life wasn't the explosion that nearly killed him. It was realizing that the danger had followed him home, disguised as kindness, and that it was his own 8-year-old son who had the courage to speak up when every adult around him was too exhausted to see clearly. Rebecca simply shook her head and told him the truth. "Your son was the bravest person in this hospital. I just listened." Daniel's recovery, free from unauthorized sedation, improved dramatically in the following weeks. He learned to walk again. He went home in time for Ethan's 9th birthday, and today, father and son are inseparable. And Ethan, now a bright, talkative kid who still draws superheroes that look suspiciously like his dad, likes to tell people that his father is the strongest man in the world. But if you ask Daniel, he'll tell you that title belongs to a 7-year-old boy who refused to stay silent. This story reminds us that courage doesn't always wear a uniform. Sometimes it's a child's whisper in an empty hospital room. Sometimes it's a nurse who trusts her instincts, even when no one else will. And sometimes the smallest voice in the room is the one that saves a life. If this story moved you, if you believe that kindness and courage can change everything, then take a moment right now to like this video. Share it with someone who needs a reminder that good still exists in this world. And subscribe to Kindness True Stories, so you never miss another story like this one, because there are so many more heroes out there whose stories deserve to be told. The blast had thrown Daniel 40 feet through the air outside a compound in a region he was not allowed to name even to his own wife. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of small moments to change lives, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness True Stories. Also, tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? And I'll see you in the next one.